Ms. Archana Vemulapalli, Corporate Vice President, Commercial AMD, a visionary who has been redefining the future of computing and connectivity. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hand together for Ms. Archana Vemulapalli.
Hi, everyone. My name is Archana, and I want to thank you in advance for being patient and waiting for the fourth speaker. And so I'll try to keep this entertaining and focused on three major things. One, we all love talking about AI, so my presentation is very much going to be about AI. The second, I'll give you AMD's and our perspective on where we're seeing the market move to. And the third will tell you about what we as a company are doing in this space. So, I'm sure all of you will undoubtedly agree with me that AI is accelerating. But if I had to frame it, if you looked at the last 18 months of what happened in AI, it was all about building models. And we are very much in what I would say the second phase of AI adoption, which is the next 18 months is going to be all about embedding intelligence into the enterprise. And this is critical because this is where India can play a massive role with its services and product footprint on how you differentiate and how you drive the market. When you ask, why do companies like AMD and others have a point of view in AI, it comes down to compute. If you thought that building models was compute intensive, reasoning models, and more importantly, autonomous agents, create an unprecedented demand for compute, even more than what we were estimating a year ago. And because of this, we've all had to get very, very creative and nimble in how we surge and scale for this demand. When you start to think about a data center, historically, any of us who've been in the data center space will tell you, fundamentally, a data center was about housing data. That's it. That's why it was called the data center. But the data centers of tomorrow are about housing intelligence. And those have to be looked at and defined very differently. And this is why compute plays a massive, massive role. And this is why each of you in your roles have to start to think about how you incorporate these decisions into the outcomes that you're driving. Now, when I talk about us being in the second phase of AI, we're no longer just about horizontally scaling AI, we're vertically scaling AI. What do I mean by that? You talk about models, you talk about APIs, talk about inferencing, but equally, we're talking about the cloud, the edge, the end device. And so you have many dimensions in which this is being consumed. So as you're thinking about this, I'd really encourage you, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about this, AI is not just about the data center. It is going to be distributed, and it is going to be pervasive. And so how you bring that narrative in becomes extremely important. Now, I'll spend a couple of minutes on what we as a company have been doing. We at AMD have been extremely intentional over the years that as you drive innovation and as you break the boundaries of what you want to do innovatively in your organizations, you need compute that meets your requirements. And this compute can be in any shape and size, and it can drive outcomes the way you want it. This means at the PC level, an AI PC can help you achieve far greater outcomes than your traditional PC would. This means that when you're talking about training and inferencing and building the next model or solving for the biggest problems, you need heavy GPU accelerators, and we have built some of the best, and we're competing head-to-head with the competition out there. When you talk about all of this, and you've heard a lot of the speakers prior talk about it, networking is key. At the end of the day, if you have a latency issue and your experience is subpar, it doesn't matter how intelligent the insight is, it just doesn't work. And so having a point of view and a perspective there is very important. And then when you talk about client processes, how do you go build that? Our adaptive business at the edge becomes super critical. When you talk to any large enterprise at scale, and we've been talking to many of you extensively, your insights become valuable when your insights happen where the data is created. And that is almost always at the edge. And so our edge footprint and our investments in that business are tremendous. So we have been very intentional about building a compute for every size and shape and requirement. And we believe that one alone won't solve the problem, but a pervasive portfolio is. The one thing I want to sort of reinforce is as we talk about AI, there were three things I touched on, right? I told you that we're in the second wave of AI. I said it's going to be not just the data center, it's going to be the edge. It's about data centers driving intelligence. I gave you a little bit of view of how we in AMD are thinking about our portfolio and how I'd encourage you to come ask us questions and how we can penetrate opportunities for you. But at the end of the day, I want to really spend a few minutes before I wrap on the importance of being open. An open ecosystem is going to drive adoption for AI in a much more broad and outreaching way. So you need to have software, you need to have an ecosystem, and you need to have hardware that supports open architectures. That is what gives you scale, it gives you flexibility, it gives you profitability, and it gives you outcomes. This is extremely important. You want to make sure that you drive these decision-making as you do it. The good thing about the AI and the generative AI market is it has evolved rapidly. But if you even pay attention to what has happened in the last 18 months, what started off as a proprietary narrative, very quickly some of the best models out there are open source models. And I'm sure each of you have been working and using on these. So you will only see the space scale. So I would encourage each of you to think about this. We as a company stand very strongly behind the open narrative, and we look forward to opportunities for working with you. And we'd love to catch up with you after. I know our teams are here in any which way that we can engage. But I will conclude by saying this. This is the most transformative time in our era. If you thought cloud computing was seismic, this is beyond seismic. And so lean in versus being cautious, take those bold risks, and encourage your partners and all of those who come to you to make sure they're leaning in a good way with you to drive to massive outcomes. We're going to be transforming the whole world collectively, and each of us should play a very active role in it versus being passive audience. So I appreciate your time again. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the sessions, and thank you again.